Hello, Bryan. It's a true pleasure to talk to you here in this format, since this is the format that you always talk to me in. And I have to say that I've enjoyed the metamorphosis from, I would guess it was kind of a jangly ambivalence to curiosity to antipathy to the concept of a negative goal, don't do something, and then kind of the apparent negation of a polarity, which, as you know, if you look at any ecology, you have the one, you have the whole. And humans are clever at creating the illusion of separation, the illusion of black and white, the illusion that men are separate from women, even though every man is born through a woman. And, mental gymnastics create these polarities, and then even more oddly pit them against each other. This is the good one, this is the bad one, without, stepping back and seeing that ultimately they're the same. You cannot have life or death without movement, and movement is the continual erasure of one pattern, which is sublimated to a new pattern. That energy never dies. It just changes form and upgrades on an evolutionary journey. And to freeze the pattern at any given point is to stop the ultimate trajectory of evolution. And don't do something is the brake that stops this evolutionary train. So I have to say that I always enjoy engaging rather than passively consuming anything. And so as part of life, as one of life's many iterations, you're bringing a new pattern to the table, something that has never existed before in this form, that's never been measured as much before, right? And so, anyway, my arc going through that, and I would say that my favorite doorway into your world is Chris Williamson, because that's where you talk about the meta-conversation, the conversation about how and why you're doing what you're doing. And I always think the meta-conversations are about 10 times more interesting than the conversation. And the meta-conversations about the meta-conversations are more interesting than those, because this is the building block of consciousness, language, framing thought, creating this illusion of distinctions through which we view the ecology of life. So thank you. In fact, let me just bring you something that, to me, speaks a little bit about the paradox of extreme ruthlessness and extreme gentleness that, for me, you represent. Now, the bouquet that actually when I thought of that bouquet, I thought, that's the gentle side of Bryan. Had blues in it. But that bouquet is wilted now before I, got to share it with you in the video. But I see, and this can also be a celebration of your new relationship. Congratulations. I guess it's not a new relationship, but a reveal. Congratulations on connecting well and surmounting the challenge of blending purpose and work and quality time and love, right? What a wonderful fusion. And but here's what I want to talk with you about. Blueprint, the many Bryans, the tension between the plan and the many voices and their interaction with the plan. Because this goes far deeper than diet or, your particular food packages. The deeper question is this relationship between the spontaneous impulses of the psyche and also the continual looping of the psychic code, the cult code that we're born into and continue with some iteration. And there's so many levels that, I want to explore this with you. Number one, if we look at the fractal nature of any pattern, then blueprint is more analogous to top-down structure organized by what I would call best practices. So, and this ties directly into my mission as the founder of Happiness Data, a nonprofit that I formed to do something fun in retirement rather than nothing or boredom, etc. So happiness data, the idea that the most intelligent culture would identify the best practices, the most efficient practices that would take the least amount of energy to create the most amount of sustainable well-being. Happiness data, the data of the pattern, of the blueprint of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, that when embodied yields the highest levels of sustainable well-being for the least amount of time, money, and natural resources, the least amount of energy, right? And so that's the gold standard. To shift, to iterate away, and just as an aside, it's been pointed out in the politics of science that bad science rarely dies with evidence. It dies when the scientist with clout who proposed the damn theory dies and then stops impeding progress or acknowledgement of new sets of data, right? Göbekli Tepe, a little bit of a punch in the face to some of the old great archaeologists, right? And so again, little punch in the face to don't die. If we want to grow as an egoic culture, sometimes we just have to wait for the idiots who hold the reins to die so that new idiots can be born and, going forward. So, but this idea that we scientifically evaluate the felt experience mentally, emotionally, physically of different lifestyles, different blueprints, and then promote the best practices of the day, which can iterate based on data, that data is the deity, right? And so you're living that with diet, which is you're living that, I should say, with health practices, right? And and so that's organizing sleep and the like. My entrance into this was cult or culture, that the way a conversation took place had a best practice, right? And that can be measured in the recipe, the focus, the protocol, the ritual, the recipe, the intention. You can measure the input, measure the output, and create more felt sustainable well-being by moving in the direction of best practices, right? And then, group sizes, for example. Dunbar identified the maximum intimacy that a human brain is capable, that the monkey mind can hold intimate knowledge of about 150 people, maximum, if there is daily exposure, right? So if you spend time with 150 people regularly, you will learn their birthdays, their allergies, their traumas, their anniversaries, their relationship status, the food they like to eat, the food they hate eating, the music they like. And that person will become alive as a multidimensional piece of art in the mirror neurons of your brain. And so your relationship with your projections about that person will line up closely, so that there's minimal gap between the world as you imagine it to be and the world that other people imagine it to be, right? And so that those mirror neurons line up, rather than the city phenomena where I've done numerous studies anecdotally, and nobody is projecting the right thing on all the strangers. And even in the extreme sense, when I've interviewed husbands and wives who have been together for years, and I ask them 5 of my favorite questions, the most important questions for determining well-being, and I ask the other one the same questions, and I ask each of them, did you know the answers to those questions? And it's always no. In 10 minutes, I can learn more of the important blueprints of a couple than they know about themselves or each other. And to me, that's a fascinating and striking opportunity, because it's free. It doesn't cut down a single tree, because it takes 10 minutes. It's a blueprint for interacting at a scale that the blueprint suggests is optimal. The science of cult, the science of culture. And in the most startling discovery of my life along these lines, because 90% of all human behavior is directly dictated by their cult or strongly influenced by it. These are things in the default mode network of the brain that nobody's analyzing these things. Nobody's cross-referencing these things to be the best belief of 10,000 beliefs, or the best belief of any culture in human history, or the best thought, or the best way to respond to the thought, or the best way to do anything. It's just, that's what we do because, right? Ta-da, that's what we do. And, so to throw 90% of the dominant species on Earth and the world that creates into the wasteland of we do it because we do it, and that's why we do it, is insane, right? And so cultural design, through the lens of 10x thinking, the opportunity to iterate that program, 10x, 100x, right? Let's look for a 10x iteration in cultural design. Cultural design is the blueprint, is the creator of the blueprint for 90% of all human behavior that is determining what happens with our planet more than any other species. Cultural design is the nexus, right, where all of that tremendous explosion of energy expenditure as we see across the world, that's what determines what gets written on the globe. And if you do an Amazon search for cultural design, there's one book, and it's barely legible. And it's not actually about the art of designing a culture. Right? So you're allowing science, certain blood, basically what your hypothesis is that anything that slows down my death or reverses it is good. And so we'll measure that to the best of our ability with our current measuring devices, and then we'll do more of the things that slow down or reverse aging, and we'll do less of the things. And I think that's a terrific metric. It's not my metric. My metric is sustainable felt experience, which has a strong corollary. And what I like about your metric is that you can't lie as much with it. I say that, and then I think of all the statistical manipulations and all of the, the studies that promote, cigarettes good for your health and blah blah blah. So I like my metric, the ongoing trajectory of felt experience over time, shared across population and demographic, because I think that's a counterbalance to a couple of things. To it's what we all want anyway. It's like, if it was more fun to die, I think we'd be all into it, right? If suffering was fun, we wouldn't try to do less of it. So it is ultimately about the felt experience. I like the discipline, and I like the measurement that you're using and sharing, because this has been my dream. We have a couple of things in common: suicide, dealing with self-destructive voices, and wrestling with that whole code dynamic. Whenever I consider suicide, it's always with an analysis of the pain, pleasure, of the value to, like, I really don't like those values. I really like these values. And I'm going backwards. And I don't know how to change it within a cultural ecology that's going backwards, because we're pack mammalian species. So this is the area that I'm most interested in, the possibility field and probability field. I don't know how big the probability field is, because I don't have a window into your world, just my own. But the possibility of, the way I framed it is 10x living, which from a branding perspective, I've got to hand it to myself on that one. 10x living, don't die. I'm going with 10x living. What you're doing, however, is the path to 10x living, if it's expanded into where it's natural evolution, meaning depression and loneliness is frankly your biggest enemy for your mission. It's not this pill or that pill. It's not hyperbaric oxygen tanks. Depression and loneliness is killing more people faster today than anything that I know. Cancer, of course, is another one, but why do people eat so much sugar? Depression and loneliness. So depression and loneliness are the reasons people want to die. I've never been afraid of dying. I've been afraid of getting up out of bed and doing the next thing. I've been afraid of working my ass off and being rejected or disappointed again. I'm not afraid of dying. That's easy. Like, oh, what a relief. And so there's just so many ways to take this conversation. And I mentioned fractals, so I'll just mention China relative to the US. China is beating the US. China is going forward as a country about 7 times faster than the US is going backwards as a country right now. The answer, blueprint, right? So China has a 50-year vision, a cohesive identity as a culture, is more science-based in many ways. And China is one of the few countries on earth that I like better today than I liked 20 years ago. Almost every country on earth, I think I liked America 20 years ago better than today. And 20 years, I liked Thailand 20 years ago more than I like it today. There's so many countries that are being bombed by cell phones and sugar into a state of dissociative identity collapse. And the West brought that to the world in many ways. And it's like, anyway, China, if we look at this tension, this question that you ask your guests, would you surrender your life to a blueprint if it was guaranteed to be way better than your blueprint, if it took care of you better than you would, right? And this is the tension. This is the dialogue globally. It's the West and China. You see, the Chinese do sublimate to a blueprint, and they are advancing. You sublimate to a blueprint, you are advancing. I do not sublimate as much to a blueprint in many ways, and am thrashing around, right? I loved your conversations about the many Bryans. And what I've learned for myself is that, and this is a conversation I want to explore with you, is I do not believe that the diet health blueprint will take off without a cultural support network. That, in my experience, is non-existent. Like, I don't know anywhere in the world where I can plot myself where the best practices that I want are taking place. And for me, I'm starting with the emotional social angle. Like, the book I'm writing right now is called 10x Relationships. And that's because that's the thing that makes me want to live. The 1% of people, for the 1% of my life that has been spent in a 10x context, is the single most inspirational driver of yes, like, I want to stick around for that. And that's been my biggest challenge in the suicide conversation is, if there's 10 times more pain than well-being, and with so many of these things, the medicine is worse or more expensive than the cure. Because I've been studying this kind of territory for 30 years. Scientifically, without all the gadgets, because you can't measure felt experience quite as easily, or I don't know how to. But if you can 10x, like, my goal is this: a clear protocol for 100 people so that it can grow a little bit before it hits the 150 wall. A clear protocol for 100 people to 10x their lives while reducing, 10x the quality of their felt experience, while reducing the ecological and financial cost of living, right? And so that's like, if that is accomplished, and of course all of your work and stuff, like 100 people can afford one hyperbaric oxygen tank in the cluster, right? 100 people will, of course, have a sauna, right? And 100 people can, of course, optimize for learning together and have a social life that includes top quality food, as opposed to saying, no, you're not going to go out with friends because they have crappy food, right? And so the 10x science health lifestyle, to me, I'm not even interested in it if it means isolating me even more, right? So I don't even want to live more and longer in a traumatic, isolated, fragmented, painful, fractured, watching things go downhill reality, right? Death is a friend. But have you expanded your vision to imagine how 100 people could live a life that's way better than your life with less money, and how that would be structured, architecturally, ritualistically? So that's the blueprint that I've been working on. And it's the exact same conversation with the exact same crux. So I've arrived and done proof of concept of the blueprint. Multiple people have told me that's the best relationship I've had in my entire life by X factor. I've learned more, I've grown more than doing with any therapist by doing this with you. This is so much. The proof of concept is there, the data is there, right? But the adoption rate is minimal. Would you do the best thing if you knew it was the best thing? Would you agree to do the right thing if you knew exactly what that was? Or do you want the freedom to listen to whatever inner voice is dominant at the time and say, oh, nobody's going to tell me what to do, right? The American way, the Chinese way. And so that's, and I think your work with data is fantastic. I think it needs an app, and I think it needs, I don't, particularly the American rebellion against authority. I don't want to be an authority because I'm immediately the target. Doesn't matter what the content is. Like, you're bringing this terrific, technology to light, but as soon as someone is saying, you're going to eat this because if you don't, it's going to cause this, and then then the community is going to go bankrupt because of diabetes and this and and you're not going to be present, and and then our community is going to die out because nobody's having sex because we're all eating potato chips in front of our TV. So you are going to do the blueprint, right? That authority immediately creates the counterforce. I don't want to be anywhere around that. I do not want to be the authority. I want the data to be the authority. But then who holds the data? Right? Because there's so much, as you know, so much trickiness as you've explored. And this is why I really appreciate your candor with Chris. Who holds the data set, and how do you deal with Bryan that shows up and it's just this once, right? When you watch your partner, I've watched so many people, it's just this. I watch the moment they lie to themselves and they're gone. That's it. That moment when they believed this Bryan instead of that Bryan, done. It's over. That just will, by the time that repeats 1,000 times, it's gone. But you can't shake someone and say, no, where are you? The other one, where's the other one in there, right? Come out. How do you do that? How do you induce that? And that's where gamification and also we've hired the smartest people in the world and paid them lots of money to manipulate the world into buying things they don't need, wasting time doing things that doesn't benefit them, and spending money in ways that doesn't help anyone. That's dumb. It's not easy. It's not hard to do a 10 times better version of that. But if you have an app of 10x living where there is no incentive, there's no desire to make money, screw it. I mean, it's ridiculous. Who needs money, right? What we need is a sustainable, high quality of life, right? And we need a security environment. And so I've done about 7 years of research in kind of a blueprint area. And the wall that I'm hitting up in every area that I interact is incentives, misaligned values, and the fact that nobody wants to do anything without an authority figure, but then wants to rebel against the authority figure. I don't want to be the authority figure. I just soon not have to hire anyone, right? And just share my thoughts. But there does need to be an accountability structure, and I think it needs to be built into the best app that has never been built, that captures the 1,000 questions and their answers that no one has ever asked or ever responded to. Meaning there's 1,000 things about me that no one in the world knows, that no one in the world has asked, some of which I have not asked and haven't answered, and the answers to which can easily lead to a 10x life. That is the most valuable technology that has not been developed, that creates the most valuable data set that doesn't exist, that is free. And so I'm not a coder, and I haven't found an app company that aligns with this in my nonprofit. And so I'm waiting for AI to catch up to the point where I can start working on these things. And welcome to the blueprint. Welcome to the conversation. And thank you for all of your work.